Welcome, 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 and buongiorno. Happy Thursday to all of you. It is noon Eastern time here in the booming metropolis of Ambler, Pennsylvania, just outside the small little town of Philadelphia, PA. Thursdays, noon Eastern time. Ambler, you know what that means. It is time for Talent Experience Live, your weekly look into all things human resources, talent acquisition, talent management, artificial intelligence, and so much more. Talent Experience Live is proudly brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, whose purpose is to help 1 billion find the right work. That's why we host this show every damn Thursday, why we have another fantastic podcast with Cliff Yurkowitz, which comes out monthly on Mondays. Check out the latest episode featuring Travis from RBC. Why we are at every single HR Tech event under the sun. Before you know it, September will be here, and please wake me up when September ends, because Phenom will be at every single HR Tech event. Why we also have a slew of fantastic webinars that you can always watch on demand or check them out live at phenom.com. And also why we are hosting our second annual I Am Phenom Europe. This time it is in Paris, France, coming up in November. So definitely check that out. Obviously, everyone familiar with this program is familiar with our flagship event in Philadelphia in the spring. We kicked I Am Phenom Europe off last year in Munich. We brought it back by popular demand, and this time we are going to try some wine and some baguettes in France. So can't wait to see you there. Obviously, all of these things are ways that we can help a billion, help us achieve our purpose. But the real way that we do it is through our our applied intelligent talent experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond, recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, and managers, well, they get to build better teams through data automation and analytics. So if any of that I just mentioned interests you at all, whether it is our webinars, our events, the Applied Intelligent Talent Experience platform, helping all of those personas do their jobs better, don't walk to phenom.com immediately following the program, because boy, do we have a great episode today. I had the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with Shandong Gala, who is our Senior Director of Product Management, and we talked all about what I think organizations are struggling with today. And it is every company has a slew of fantastic data, but they have no insights from it. They can't connect the dots. And we dive into it and the reasonings behind it. Stuff like disjointed systems, stuff like always trying to make yourself look best. We've all been there. We've had those managers on cross-functional teams who kind of peacock a little bit when they get into meetings, try and craft the data and tell a story that makes them look great and everyone else looks poor. And all of this happens because there's no cross-functional communication, because we're not sharing the same numbers. We're not targeting the same goals. And Shandon and I really get into the crux of it. We have a couple fun examples as well, like speeding in a Ferrari versus in an autonomous Tesla or other vehicle. So you won't want to miss any of this episode. If you do miss a moment of it, if you have to hop up, get a call, whatever it may be, daycare calls, you can always watch the replay here on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. And of course, we always have the podcast for those of you who like to listen in the car on Spotify as well. Without any further hesitation, here's myself and Shandon breaking down being data rich, but insight poor. Shandon, welcome to the program. Excited to have you today. We're, a great conversation around data. I think HR organization claims to have it, but not too many know what to do with it. So I want to start with kind of a broad question here. You work with some of the largest organizations in the world every single day. And when you have communications with these, when you chat with them, what is the most common data problem that you typically see? And why does this continue to happen even after organizations continue to invest in HR technology?
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you for having me here, Devin. Nice to meet you, and happy to participate in this. Back to your question. So, what is the most common data problem that HR companies have? It's probably universal. The HR loves to buy, point solutions like, this is a great solution for CRM. Let me buy this. Here's a great HRIS solution. love this other product for engagement. We end up with fragmented solutions. And the challenge is that, HR, if you were a marketing team or a sales team, you have an analytics team. You're funded to. It's so crucial to have those analytics. It drives business. You end up with an analytics team, or some data engineers who'll help pull all of that together. But when it comes to HR, fragmented data is what ops teams struggle with. So even if you have a people analyst and ops team member who's pulling together reporting, just gluing together all of this data, connecting the dots and making sense out of it is one of the biggest challenges for the HR team.
Yeah, you mentioned HR loves to purchase point solution. Reminds me of my daughter. She loves to buy Barbies, just the individual ones.
Yeah.
So never, the big Barbie dream house. She wants the car, right? Only, and it's because at that exact moment, that's what she's interested in. That is the problem that we are trying to solve for, as opposed to creating this whole ecosystem, which it sounds like it may be timely and difficult to roll out all at once, but it is eventually going to save you time in the end. And I segue that to a comment that a colleague, Branka, had said to me the other day, that we hear a lot within the industry is that we are data rich, but we lack insights. We are insight poor, if you will. Yeah. What does that actually look like inside a talent organization? What's happening on a day-to-day basis where they say, we have all this data, but we can't make sense of it?
Yep. So let's unpack that a little more, right? What does data rich mean? Like, today, 20 or 30 years into, the key parts of when we started collecting data, we've got phenomenal amount of data. We collect data about candidates, jobs, how are they navigating, what are their skills. All of this information is available, but what makes it hard is, one, fragmented data. We already talked about it. But the second part is, HR folks are focusing on, delivering great employee experiences, delivering great, talent experiences or candidate experiences. How do you convince this candidate that this is the right job for them and, this is the right fit? When it comes to data and being able to read a chart and, be able to understand, what's the insight behind it, it requires special skills. And, we're expecting that everybody should be having those skills, but the truth is that not everybody has the ability to be able to read information and understand what is the insight out of it. And to compound it, when it comes to the talent space, there's so many variables at play. There's time to fill. There is how long is a candidate sitting in a certain stage? How are candidates, how many candidates applied? How are they moving through the various phases of the pipeline? How does it compare with, prior jobs in the same category? How does it compare with other locations? Is it just us having this problem? So when you put all of this together, understanding the meaning of, what is causing us to deliver these jobs in a given time frame, or what is causing delays in delivering those jobs in the right time frame. All of the data is available. Just processing all of that, harnessing the insights out of it is what makes it very hard. And compounded with that is these teams are spread so thin. So you have somebody who's supposed to be managing vendors, relationships, the ops person who's configuring the various tools. Now they're overloaded with pull me this report, or help me pull this report for this. And you end up with multiple reports. You're scrambling to put together answers, and most of the time what ends up is you're just surfacing up more data. You're just saying, hey, here's how many jobs we have, here's what's open right now, or here's how many candidates have applied for this job, versus being able to get to the insight of what is this data telling me? Is there an emerging trend that I should notice? And what if I had information about, on this job you have plenty of candidates, your challenge is getting them screened and identifying the right candidate to move through the pipeline. In this other job you don't have enough candidates, and here's where you need a few strategies to be able to go and source candidates. So these are the insights that HR teams are lacking or talent acquisition teams are lacking. And today, the tools and techniques that they have, they're just helping them mine through data versus getting an insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, what I was going to say is it reminds me of my Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
So I have all of this data, it tracks my steps, tracks my exercise, even my sleep score now, which I still can't get used to because sleeping with the watch on, it wakes my wife up. It's a whole nother nightmare. But I have all of this, yet I still don't have, a six pack of abs. I still don't look like a Hollywood movie star on the beach. And it's because I have this data, but I'm probably not telling the right story, right? It's not sharing that I still enjoy ice cream, at midnight. I still enjoy waffles with syrup and all sorts of these things. I'm not just only eating salad. So I have this data and it's painting the wrong picture, which brings me to the next question that I have for you around executives walking into meetings. You just described all of this data. It may be, all of this data. It may be fragmented across ATS, CRM, and RIT systems. I want to ask you, is this because teams will look through this specific information, this specific data, and try and tell their best story to make them look great? Like I think of an events team within a talent acquisition function. They want to say, hey, we brought in all of these candidates, right? Versus a recruiting team who was like, well, they didn't show up for their first round interviews or whatever that may be. Everyone's kind of looking at it separately through all of these tools, and you're not getting that full picture. Is that why meetings seem scattered, where individuals seem almost unprepared, but they're still bringing data that just doesn't tell the right story?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love your analogy, by the way, of the Apple Watch. Right? I think if we just start off there, you had a great point, which is, how come I don't have a six pack and all of those things, and the point is that that is what you might be having in your mind, or your perspective is like, how do I get there? Somebody else looking for, how do I run this 50-mile ultra marathon or whatever it is, right? And there, every person has a different lens and vantage point. And to your analogy, it's all data. Like, how do I make sense out of where I'm trying to go, and give me the information, which is what is the right metric, what is the set of things that I should follow, and applying it back to talent acquisition. Why are these TA leaders still unprepared? When they walk into a meeting, they go in with a set of insights that are pulled from, let's say, writing some SQLs. Somebody ran a few SQL commands, extracted some data for them. It could be a few Tableau reports that they've created, and they're using that information. And so it's more system questions rather than business questions. What, as a business leader, what they care about is, I needed all these recs filled yesterday. How soon can I get my positions filled? And now because they're not getting answers, they are starting to probe to say, oh, what, why is time to fill increasing? Or why is it, how does it compare between my different locations? What if I hire, in Dallas instead of, Philly? Is that going to make it faster? And more often than not, those answers, or the ability to be able to look beyond and say, let's look at it together. I wonder, what's going on in Dallas, and the ability to be able to do that in that instant is missing.
Yeah.
The tooling doesn't support them. It's always, let me get back to you, and then the cycle starts, which is like, okay, I have to go back. I have to task this person with this thing. They'll pull that information. You go back in a week, the leader has already forgotten about what they asked for, or they have a new question, and then your cycle starts all over again. So you end up making hypotheses and decisions based on those hypotheses, rather than a data driven and insight driven decision, if you will.
And there's a key point there, is that it's always, let's get back to you. By the time you get back with that information, the data may be stale, right? It may have already changed. The success of hiring in Dallas or Philadelphia could be because of an external factor that you don't have your finger on per se, right? It is a new housing development, layoffs from another organization, whatever that may be. And if you don't have access to that information fast enough, by the time you're able to present it, you have the wrong hypothesis, right?
Yeah,
So some of those instantaneous pulls is the key to
absolutely.
success there.
I mean, let me add with a quick customer story. Like
Yeah.
this happened about a year and a half ago, where we this customer, public fintech company, they brought in people analyst, and started building reports internally. They started building out Tableau interfaces, if you will. And what they realized is that, okay, this is monthly data. They would put that together, and they spent 6 months building out this whole infrastructure or whatever process, and their analysts left, and they were back to ground zero. They did not know how to, the CHRO had signed up to the leadership team saying that I'm going to deliver this for you. And the struggle was, people coming, we don't have the data, was the common problem that all of the leaders, this is a growing company, so they hiring was a critical activity. They were able to apply the right tooling through what we supported to be able to get to a stage where, this is in the words of the CHRO, we have stopped asking about asking the question or saying that we don't have access to the data, to what are we going to do about this, because we're able to look at this information together.
No, it's so vital, and having everyone on the same team. I mean, we talked about the fragmentation there, about how you can paint different stories with different information, and you just shared the story how that costs the business, especially when you have one gatekeeper leave and then all of the information is gone.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about maybe the opposite side about this, specifically, maybe not using that customer example, but one similar to it. What happens to the teams that are in charge of this information when you are able to access this data, when you are able to build reports? I mean, the people analytics teams, the TA ops teams, how does their role change, or maybe even evolve when they have access to unified data like this, that they can paint full pictures and pin down that hiring in Dallas or a specific region almost instantaneously?
Yeah. Dream state, right? Every TA leader's dream, or recruiter's dream for the matter, is, I hope I find the best candidates, and present them to the hiring manager. The hiring manager loves these candidates, moves them to interview. The interview is great, and we end up hiring the candidate all done in a week.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. But to build on that, right? So the intent is like, hey, we went through all this process, we aligned the budgets, now we want to get candidates through the process and find the best candidates who will stay and deliver business value. The emphasis and the focus is two-pronged there. One is, as a TA leader, I'm looking at my team and saying, are they firing on all 6 cylinders, 8 cylinders, whatever it is, and they're delivering to their best? Do I have the best machine, best people to be able to deliver excellence, right? All of those require measures, like, are my recruiters overloaded? Like, are some of my recruiters working with 15 different hiring managers and challenged with context switching? Are some of them dealing with 3,000 candidates who applied for these jobs, and they're having a nightmare trying to screen all of them? So it's not one size fits all, and to be able to bring it all together and present it in a cohesive way, and in a meaningful way, to say, here's what actions you can take on this job versus this other job. Here's what you can do when you're thinking about your business strategy and where you're going with all of this.
It sounds like it becomes less of a treasure hunt, right? To find out, maybe treasure hunt is the wrong word, but because you're certainly not going to find a treasure if you're running into these challenges, but less of that search for the answers and more focused on solutions, right? You can immediately identify how to rectify those red flags. And I think a lot of that is expectations are increasing dramatically from a human level. How many times, I'll say this for myself. If I have a question, I'll start to research it using, GPTs and generative AI, and I'm able to drill deeper. That expectation is now carried over into the business world, where if a business leader has a question, they expect it answered instantaneously as well. And if
Right.
they don't, I imagine they're probably going to do some research on their own. And that doesn't mean filtering through, journals and
Yeah.
research and paperwork and everything like that. It's at the tips of our fingers.
Mhm.
So when these questions do come up in business meetings and a TA team can't answer it right away, they're not able to provide that solution.
Mhm.
What happens next? What is the cycle that typically happens from clients that you're speaking with, and what are the ripple down effects from that?
Yeah. So, I mean, several costs to the business, right? In terms of one, there is a lack of trust, number one, and the most expensive thing, which is like, I have visibility into everything that's happening in my organization, and I'm dependent on this other organization to deliver the hires that I need to be able to deliver on business goals, and I don't have visibility. And as a leader, that makes me feel very uncomfortable. And that is when you see, leaders, as if I'm a CTO or I'm the head of sales, I'm busy building products, or I'm busy landing customers or new relationships for the company. I shouldn't have to worry about figuring out how to staff my organization.
Yeah.
And to be able to deliver those capabilities, enabling HR with the right tooling to be able to um, you know make all of this simple, right? You don't have to boil the ocean to be able to get insights. How do you get this information in a simple way to be able to help deliver value to your customers? So the impacts to the business are, delayed hiring. You're not able to staff up in certain locations. You're overspending because you don't know which sources are delivering those top hires. You're not able to optimize your spend. You don't have the competitive insights to be able to say, here's I'm losing candidates because my compensation options are not up to mark, and that's why candidates are. We've spent all this time and effort getting them to interviews. We've been doing interviews, and we're losing candidates because we are not able to package them with the right offer.
Compensation is a whole nother story. The black box that is, and how there have been laws passed in states like California and New York where you have to post compensation in the job description, and you end up with these wide ranges of $100,000 to $2 million annually, or whatever it may
Yeah.
be. We won't go down that path because I I know that some people have some fiery opinions on that. But you mentioned visibility there.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, how often do organizations describe a hiring problem when it's just a visibility problem in disguise? You mentioned some of the symptoms there, right? Of pharma individuals or pharma executives building products, sales
Yeah.
folks focusing. How often is visibility truly the issue? And when it's brought up in conversation, it's a hiring problem, it's a pipeline problem, it's we're not getting enough candidates to apply, we're not moving enough people through the process fast enough, we're not getting to the offer stage to find out that our compensation isn't there. How frequently is that happening because people don't have access to the insights from this data that we're talking about here?
Yeah, great question. Um, just a straight answer is it's a lot, and it's the lack of visibility or the ability to be able to interpret that information that is leading to what it seems like a hiring problem. So it's not one size fits all, like we talked about. If you pick a certain job, you might have it's a data analyst job, and you received 5,000 applicants because the market is flooded with data analysts. In that case, not knowing that the recruiter is struggling with how do I screen 5,000 applicants or figure out how to qualify 5,000 applicants and move them through the process, is very different from I'm trying to hire nurses and they're not applying for jobs. I need to figure out a way to encourage them to schedule calls with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the variation is so great. The level of depth that variation between jobs, like between segments, between hypercells, are what is causing the gap. And so having the visibility that we are pushing all these candidates to the hiring manager, but the hiring manager is rejecting them at the interview stage. That seems too late. The
Mhm.
fact that we've gotten all the way to an interview, and then your hiring manager is rejecting, means that there's something wrong upstream. You haven't qualified them enough through the job post or through the initial screening to be able to prevent these unnecessary churn that's happening with the organization, spending burning hours trying to do so many interviews. So each of these have different strategies. So if you're doing too many interviews, what does that mean? Let's go upstream and figure out how to screen better, how to optimize those things. If you're having too many candidates, how do we bring in automation to be able to identify the candidates who are the right fit for the job, and focus on automated screens or something that will help narrow down the focus of the recruiter who's busy with like a dozen jobs.
Mhm.
And so not having that granular level visibility and surfacing it up in a meaningful way that is simple for a recruiter, a hiring manager, an org leader to understand and say, here's the theme going on within this organization and or this part of my organization, and here's what I can do about it. If I turn the dial a little bit and say, what, maybe we should spend a little more time on screening, or bring in these tools to be able to help automate some of those things, it'll ease up the rest of the process.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of organizations, that's a black box, right? Oftentimes, you talk to recruiters or talent acquisition folks, and they say there's XYZ. Hiring managers is just really difficult to work with. They're an A player; they're fantastic at their day job, but when it comes to getting feedback for a candidate or getting time on their calendar or rescheduling, they really don't have any insight there. They get terms that we've heard in the past before is so and so is an A player. Can you get me a candidate that looks exactly like this?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Does that mean the university or degree that they went to? Does that mean their work ethic? Does that mean, their passions and what they do on the weekend? We don't know. And I imagine a future state down the line where some of the challenges that you're describing of too many candidates that aren't qualified enough, or you have to filter through. This is where something like the intake agent can really take over, right? Where post interview, it is a hiring manager having a conversation with AI saying, I really liked this about so-and-so's background, would love more candidates, around that, appreciated how they answer this. And when you have those transcripts, when you have those records to go back, number one, it's fresh in individual's mind. And number two, you can then look back at how they answered the question, what specifically it was, and start to gather those insights. It's an exciting thing to think about once it's put to, feet to pavement, if you will, once they have it. Right now, it almost seems science fiction. I know it's not, but we're we're getting there. We're getting
Absolutely.
there. That's the dream state for me.
Yeah. And
Oh yes, you go.
and just to add to that, right? With AI coming in and all of these tooling, we are now able to say, for this specific hypercell or this combination, you are a healthcare provider, and you're trying to hire nurses, and in this location, and there is a lot of competition in Dallas, and this is what you're struggling with. Here's how to optimize it. In Pittsburgh, totally different dynamic. You have a lot of healthcare workers that are applying for your jobs, but you have a different problem where you're not able to find enough time with your physicians to be able to complete the interviews. Being able to personalize it to that level and drive actions, and then surface up recommendations is the holy grail here, which is you don't have to we started off with data and insights and all of those things. It's all about actions. If the data and insights are not helping me take an action, then there's something broken in the process here.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's why I think a lot of some of the technologies that you had mentioned before, the BI tools, it's where they fall short. It's because they are point solutions and they can't connect those dots from those specific experiences, right? Those specific interviews.
Right.
I imagine a hiring manager having the most hectic of days where they're putting out fires everywhere. But during their lunch break, they were able to get in an interview and they've completely forgotten all about it, right? At the end of the day, they get a recap of what was spoken about and they
Mhm.
could give their feedback there almost like it happened instantaneously. Looking forward, I want to ask you if you could
Mhm.
change one thing about how talent organizations think about data and analytics, not the technology, but their mindset overall, what would that be?
This part is the fascinating part for me. The way I characterize this or talk about it is that for teams, on both sides, companies like us who are building products and solutions, and hearing customers and what they're expressing, and for people who are asking for things, right? In both cases, they're describing symptoms, and what I relate that to is like, what they're describing is, I want a faster horse cart or a faster horse carriage is the
Mm-hmm.
visual that comes into mind. But you have to think about the automobile or the car that they haven't seen yet, or the flying car that is possible now. What is that gap? Like, let's not solve the symptom and say, you're asking for reporting, so let me bring in a Tableau solution or a Power BI, or let me make that easy for you. It's very easy to copy somebody and say, what, we also need a lake house, we should be putting all this reporting on top of it, let's hire some data scientists, or let's put cursor on it. It requires special skills. And so looking at the Uber problem, which is like, hey, we need visibility into what is going on. I need to optimize and make sure my team is, operating in full throttle. Those require a different mindset and approach. And, thinking about, I'm going to deliver a car for you while you're describing a faster horse cart is the gap that is missing on, or the gap that I see. And that's where we as Phenom are able to push the envelope and help customers. I was on this call with a healthcare prospect 3 days ago, and very similar to what I was describing. Here's all the symptoms, and the answer that we showed was like, great, this is something that I can use today, and it's like 5 million times better than anything that we've seen or used so far.
Yeah. I love that car analogy, or the faster horse cart, because my mind immediately goes to the sports car, the Ferrari, the Lamborghini,
Yeah.
whatever that may be. What's one of the offsets of that is speeding tickets, right? You can move as fast as you want to, but it's going to speed. You're going to get pulled over, and that might slow you down in the end. The other thing that you always hear about those cars, and I don't know because I don't own one, but is that they are expensive to maintain
Yeah.
and that they are expensive to fix if you're moving too fast and you crash, right? All of a sudden you have to go back to your Honda Civic or
Yep.
Accord or whatever it may be, or ride a bike like I do.
Mhm.
But when you describe this sports car analogy, or this faster car, it begs the question that I have, which is, what does it truly look like for an organization to solve this problem? Is it the electric Tesla that just gets you from A to B, hands free, and you're able to do that while maintaining, keeping humans in the loop and going there? And how does a business know when they've achieved it, right? They may be still looking for that sports car, still looking to move faster, but they have to get from A to B and make sure that everything works in
Yep.
between. Does that make sense, that analogy? I was all over the place there, but I think I brought it back to home plate
Absolutely.
for us.
So the way to think about it is, when you're making a chess move, when you're playing chess and making a move, the guidance is always think about the next couple of moves, what might happen. I think that applies to this scenario very well, which is when a customer says that, hey, I don't have access to the data. I need access to the data. Can you give me an export, or can you give me a way? Can I visualize this? Can I see a trend? It's not about solving that data problem. It's about, okay, let's talk about it. What are you trying to do with this? Okay, let's say I give you that trend. What are you going to do with that? I'm going to present it to a leader. what will their question be? Why are they interested in this specific trend? Why is a CTO trying to look at a time to fill trend in the first place? Well, we haven't filled their jobs fast enough, and they're looking at what's going on, and they want more visibility into it. So how do we address that?
Yeah.
Like if we can go back and tell the CTO that here's of the 60 jobs that we're hiring for your organization, here's the 40 that are going well, here's the 20 that need attention, here's 5 where we could use, we probably need to go external and hire an agency, here's the 7 that your hiring managers need to step up and help us out because they're not moving these fast. Way better story than talking about I need time to fill and give me an analysis on what is causing delays in filling these jobs.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you answer that question versus give me a chart which shows time to fill trends and I can slice it by departments or by offices and things like that?
Yeah. If you have nothing to compare it against to, or no real proof points of it, it serves no value, right? At the end of the day, it's just smoke and mirrors. This has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate it. Excited to learn more about X Plus and how this is all working together. Thank you so much for joining today. I've enjoyed the conversation. I can't wait for us to do it again. Maybe we'll get a customer on who can share overcoming some of these data challenges and getting those insights, moving from data rich to insight rich, I think is the goal that we all have here. Machanda, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Likewise. And thank you for having me here, Devin.
Of course. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Shandan, thank you so much for joining the conversation today. I had fun. I think you did as well. Can't wait to have you back on here as we hopefully share some examples of some organizations that are getting to pull those insights a little bit better than they were, coming to executive meetings and being a bit more collaborative. We could all use a bit more collaboration, couldn't we? Anyway, that does it for another episode of Talent Experience Live. Thank you all so much for joining and hanging out with us, for this hour or so. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and I can't wait to see you all next week because, as I mentioned at the top of the program, we do this every damn Thursday. Everyone be safe, be healthy, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.